This is
Make it plain.
Make it plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Folks, we're just days away from big general election day. Hope everybody is exercising their rights wherever your state is to early vote. And I hope you're sharing with loved ones the importance of voting. Where are we? Who better to check in with than our dear friend, the founder of Thursday Kos, the founder of Civics with a Q, the host of The Brief, Markos Moulitsas. Hey man, how are you?
Doing good. And since you mentioned early vote, we've talked about how important that is. Not just you locking that vote, but then GOTV operation, get out the vote operators don't have to come ask you to vote. Because if you're listening to the show, you probably are going to vote anyway. So it's not really helpful for them to waste their time contacting you. If you vote early, they cross you off that list, and then they can talk to people who actually may be iffy voters. So that is literally one of the best things you can do to help us win in a couple of weeks. And the second thing, go to dailykos.com. I'm going to pitch early, Mark. dailykos.com/GOTV. Get out the vote. dailykos.com/GOTV. We partnered with organizations in all the battleground states. You can write letters. You can do election poll watching. There's a ton of things that we have on there. So it's not our GOTV. It's everybody else's really great programs. We're directing people to where, places near them, or, everybody has different talents. Some people like to talk on the phone. Some people like to knock on doors. Some people like to write letters. So dailykos.com/GOTV. Mark, the polls, it's tied right now. The team that works the hardest is going to win this thing, and it's got to be us. Too much is on the line.
Politics is always about who out-organizes who. It's about organization, and that's GOTV. Folks, yes, please go to dailykos.com/GOTV. You can do something. You could help in many, many ways, even in the smallest ways. You have no idea. That little bit. And all these races are close now. So don't think that your help may not make a big difference if a few people are moved, if a few more people have gotten to the polls and what have you. A lot of conversation about Fetterman. I was with some other colleagues and was disappointed. They were very critical of him. Some even said his performance at the debate could cost him. I think that would be tragic. I mean, the man had a stroke. He still articulated the issues, did he not? I mean, I think people know what happened, and Oz is just not an option.
Mark, I don't think you're wrong. There's two sort of substantive criticisms. One is his delivery was difficult, and he did just have a stroke. He talked about the issues, though. He was right on the issues, but his delivery was difficult, and his ability to call Dr. Oz on his BS was compromised. He just didn't. And if you watch a debate, Dr. Oz is talking a million miles an hour. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's talking in a way that he can spew all the BS, knowing that Fetterman's not going to be able to track and respond to it. So it was, there's a lot of questions whether his team should have allowed him to do the debate. Now, I will say in the moment, I was like, oh crap. In the aftermath, I'm a little less worried. And here's the reason why. One is I've been tracking the post coverage in conservative circles. So not like the broader media, like in conservative circles. It's not as harsh as the coverage of Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, who they made out to be blithering idiots. Like if you watch the post debate coverage, it was a whole different world, right? I mean, it was just how mentally incapacitated they were. Weirdly enough, they weren't as harsh on Fetterman, where they actually had the stronger case. Second, a couple of weeks ago, you may remember we had this whole sort of controversy over NBC News making a big deal out of John Fetterman using closed captioning because he can process faster with written word than auditory. And so it was a big deal for about 2 weeks. So at this point, there wasn't anybody in Pennsylvania who would have been shocked by this. So quite ironically, we at the time we were all like outraged that NBC decided to make a big deal out of this. Yet in the end, it may have actually paved the way. So it wasn't anything new. It was like, yeah, okay, yeah, of course he just had a stroke. I mean, we just spent 2 weeks talking about his stroke and how he's recovering. So that was the second piece that I think sort of mitigate the damage. And the third is that Dr. Oz gave us so much material to work with. One, he's just not a very likable candidate. And I mean that not in the talking points sense. I mean, he's just literally very unlikable. And the National Review, which is a conservative magazine, went out to a deeply conservative district in the middle of the Alabama part of Pennsylvania, place that voted for Trump, 80%, rural, and started talking to people. And it was amazing how many straight ticket Republicans they talked to who said either they weren't going to vote at all or that they were going to vote for Fetterman. And the arguments against Oz was that he was slick talking and he didn't even live here. Like that has really penetrated. And there was nothing in that debate that negates that argument. He was slick talking and he's still not from Pennsylvania. So, and then in the end, like, debates really don't matter. I mean, if debates mattered, Georgia's Senate race would be done by now, right? I mean, the same people that are like hyperventilating about John Fetterman, will sit there and defend Herschel Walker, despite the fact that Herschel Walker has a permanent condition. John Fetterman is still in the recovery process and is expected to make a full recovery. So, it wasn't great. I still wish his team hadn't made him do it, but it's not the catastrophe. Now, Mark, we'll talk next week, and then I'll have polling, and I'll be like, oh, maybe it did have an effect. My suspicion, and let's put a sort of flag on this, and let's talk about this next week, because I'll know by next week with our civics polling if it's affected the race, and I suspect it won't make an impact. Oh, and the last piece, Oz gave us a lot of material, including saying that a woman's right to choose was between her doctor, and local politicians. He literally said that. That was the quote. He gave us the biggest gift. So all the talk about, okay, Fetterman had a hard time. He stuttered some in getting some of his ideas out. The ideas were fine. Dr. Oz literally wants to stick a government bureaucrat in their doctor's office when you're making your decisions.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's that helps. And again, I hope you're right that people will look at this and be a little bit more lenient about it. But I know you're right because I thought about it. What is this? We're just over a week out. Is this debate really going to change?
2 weeks. 2 weeks. A week and a half, right? Yeah.
I'm saying just a little over a week.
Yeah.
We're under 2 weeks. Is this debate going to change people's minds anyway? Maybe a handful, but you're right. When Oz gave us the other quote, that helps. And are we, I'm hearing from people who are on our side, unfortunately, complaining about Fetterman and his performance. The right-wing people aren't complaining about either Herschel Walker's multiple personality disorder, documented, diagnosed, or his CTE, which is undocumented, but who doesn't have CTE in the NFL? And he was a running back. So we're going to sit up and convince ourselves he's the only running back in the history of the NFL who didn't get CTE. Right. I mean, come on now, that's a mere, maybe he's just run on that. I didn't get CTE. Then maybe, that might be something, you got the secret of life. You can be more than a senator, if that's true. But if Herschel can do it with all of his issues, why can people on our side not be so hard on Fetterman? So hopefully this will turn out in the right way. But as we said earlier, folks, you got to get involved. Help him out. Go to dailykos.com /GOTV. Do we have, speaking of Georgia, do we have any new, anything new on Georgia, any new information? I'm getting a little nervous. Maybe I should.
No, it's a good time to be nervous. I mean, remember polls it's tough to poll right now. We still don't know if we're picking up the full Trump vote. They're nihilists. They're not answering the phones. They're not talking to pollsters. They want to burn down the system. They're not going to participate in the political process beyond voting for Trump's fix. And we have record voter registration with adults under the age of 25. They're not getting picked up by polling. I mean, they're not picking up the phone to talk to a pollster. And, civics, we use email to poll. How are we getting under 25, right? So they're not, my kids don't know what email is. I mean, God forbid you email them something. Maybe they'll find it 3 weeks later. So it's a incredibly difficult time to reach some key voting demographics. And we don't even know who is going to turn out. So we've seen the early vote, and the early vote is very, very encouraging. Democratic performance is high, but we know that Democrats vote early and Republicans vote on election day. So we don't really know what Republican turnout is going to look like. We know that we're looking pretty good, but early vote is all that tells us is that some of our people have voted. Maybe tomorrow no Democrats vote anymore. Maybe all the Democrats that are going to vote will have already voted. I mean, that's probably not true, but we don't know, right? There's all these question marks. So it's good. We're banking votes. It makes it easier for our GOTV operation to do their job the last week and on election day. So that's always important. So again, vote early. But we have so much uncertainty. To your question about Georgia, everything I've seen is that Warnock in the Senate race is slowly pulling away from Herschel Walker, that there is some daylight starting to form. And I've seen 4 to 6 points in civics polling is generally maybe a little bit tighter than that, but not much. Narrow leads for Raphael Warnock, the Democrat. The polling also shows that Stacey Abrams, unfortunately, is falling behind, that it would take some kind of turnout miracle or a major polling miss for her to win. I think that Georgia's Republican governor, what's his face? I was going to say Nathan Deal, but that's the last guy. Kemp, yeah. Trump going after him really hard made it easier for him in a general election to separate himself from Donald Trump, which just made it easier for him to keep some support in the Atlanta suburbs. So you're gonna see some ticket splitting for sure. You're gonna see people who think Kemp is totally fine and he's kind of a moderate and he wasn't as scary as people thought he would be, and Trump hates him. So how bad can he actually be? And then you're gonna see people who are gonna look at Herschel Walker and go, hell no, I'm gonna vote for Raphael Warnock. So you're gonna see some ticket splitting. So to the extent that Stacey loses, that's what the polling says right now. That doesn't mean it's determinative. And even in that polling, she is not that far behind. I've seen her, 4 or 5 points. It's definitely within the margin of a polling miss and of a strong ground game. So I'm not writing that off. I'm just, saying that's what it looks like at the moment. So, but it's very rare, Mark, to see that kind of disparity between a governor candidate and a Senate candidate. Usually we're so partisanized at this point that they track pretty well. I'm seeing about a 6 to 7 point split, which means about 6 to 7 percent of people. And I'm guessing, this is just an educated guess, that it's those college educated white suburbanites who are trending Democratic, who go, okay, no, Kemp isn't so bad, but Herschel Walker really is. So they're going to split that ticket.
And some of that too is organized and instigated sexism too. We know that by what's on social media. Stacey's a woman.
Yep.
She's a Black woman. And she's being treated differently. And then you got jokers. See, people focus on Kanye. But what Killer Mike is doing, the other rapper down in Georgia, isn't helping either. Okay? Because he's taking pictures with Kemp and, I'm like, why are you doing that? Who does that? So, and he's, and people, you got the same crew on Twitter ADOS, the same crew that said Kamala wasn't a real African American. Same group of people that want to boycott the Woman King, the movie, for no reason. They're saying Stacey doesn't really care about black men. What's the basis for saying that? Brian Kemp cares about black men?
Oh, he
Right.
so much.
Part of the problem, and we still haven't figured out a way to offset the social media trolling that's a part of this. So that's a little scary. So I'm looking at civics and the generic ballot, and we don't look bad overall. 49% voting Democrat, 46% voting Republican. And it's really good from 18 to 49. But when you get them to 50 to 64, ladies and gentlemen, it goes more Republican. 65 plus goes more Republican. That probably doesn't surprise anyone. It is, however, if you look at obviously postgraduates, college graduates, it's close for college graduates on the generic ballot. They're going to be voting Democratic. But even amongst non-college graduates, 48% Democratic, 47% Republican. College graduates, it's 48% Democratic, 47% Republican. It's tight, but it's there. Obviously, there's the split, 55% men are Republican versus 57% women are Democratic. In terms of race, 55% of whites going Republican, while it is obviously 87% African Americans going Democratic. But I think that you look at all the education categories, even the non-college, that's hopeful. The 50 to 64-year-old, that's a big gap. The 65 plus, that's a big gap, 5 percentage points. 18 to 34, 20% gap. 18, if they come out to vote. I should say we, because I'm really still an 18.
We don't age. We just don't age.
I still look 18 to 34. If we come out to vote, that's a 20% gap. If 35 to 49, those a little older than Markos and me, if they come out to vote, that's a 6% gap. So why shouldn't I feel, Mr. Moulitsas, optimistic about some of those numbers?
It's really amazing. I will do one last split on that civics generic ballot. Non-college whites are 58-37 Republican. That's why they love the uneducated. That's their ace in the cards, right? So are they going to vote? So the big question again is going to be who votes. As you said, women are more Democratic. More women vote anyway, just in the generic regular election. Usually it's about 53% of the electorate is women. 47% are men. And then you have this, highly, highly politicized abortion environment, which hopefully spike that even further, right? So there's a lot of big question marks. But no, you're right. There's nothing indicating that there's a red wave coming. And it's kind of fascinating because we saw last week, there's a poll by Ann Seltzer in Iowa. Now, Ann Seltzer is the most accurate pollster anywhere. She only polls Iowa. And she's always on the dot. And Iowa's a lot easier to poll because everybody's white, everybody's old. So, she has some advantages. She doesn't have to, it's not a very young state. So it's actually a lot easier to poll, but she's always on the mark. And in last week, she had a poll the Senate race in Iowa. Nobody's talking Iowa Senate race. Chuck Grassley. Trump won the state by 8 points. Yet this poll had Grassley winning by only 3 points. It was 45-42, right? And then there's a libertarian that's getting a bunch of support. So it's a real race. In a wave election, places like Iowa are not going to be competitive. It's patently absurd, right? So liberals see that though, and we're like, yeah, no, don't believe it. That can't be real. It's an outlier. And it could be, right? I'm not saying it's not an outlier, right? But here's the difference. generic congressional ballot polls consistently give Democrats a 2 to 4 point advantage. I mean, you showed Civics has this +3, right? 49-46. There was one poll by, I think it was it CNN? No, it was Washington Post, I think. Well, one of those major media outlets had one poll that had Republicans going from -3 in the generic congressional ballot to +4. So like a 7-point swing. Where we've talked a long time, polling doesn't swing that way. That's literally the definition of an outlier. But because of that one poll that completely looked like an outlier, liberals are freaking out. The media has decided that, well, maybe there is the red wave happening after all. I mean, it's been absolutely, it's fascinating from a sociological standpoint. It's patently absurd from a political one. The situation on the ground has not shifted. But because of that one poll, people are saying, oh, well, maybe abortion has lost its salience. No, abortion has not lost its salience. If you look at that, at our Daily Kos Civics poll at civicswithaq.com, you'll see that the dynamic is pretty flat. Yeah, it goes up a point, down a point. That's really float within the margin of error. That's not real change. People are locked in. So right now, I would say based on the preponderance of the polling that we're at probably +3, we've seen, Mark, we've talked about this. We've had 6 special elections since the Dobbs decision, not including the Kansas abortion election. 6 special elections. Democrats have outperformed Joe Biden by 6 points since Dobbs in those 6 special elections. And people say, oh, well, different dynamics. And it's true, Mark. Special elections are not November elections. But historically, those have always favored Republicans, because who votes in the middle of the summer, an election that people don't even know is happening? Old people, old white people, and they're mostly Republican. Yet we saw, Democrats outperform Joe Biden by 6 points on average on those 6 special elections. So we have real world proof that something is happening. It might not be caught by the polling, or maybe the polling is missing on, it's over generous to Democrats. All of the above are possible. But this idea that the race is closing, it's not. Polling is pretty solid and stable, showing that slight advantage. Now, here's where things get complicated, Mark. +3 Democrats does not mean +3% of the House because of partisan gerrymandering. So there's that factor. So to sort of guarantee a Democratic victory, you'd really want to be in like a +5 to overcome the rigging of the House in the Republicans' favor. So there's that piece. So that's complicated. But the other component is right now, Democrats hold a majority of Biden districts. There are 224 House seats in the new map that Joe Biden won. You need 217 for the majority. We have 200. So we don't need to outperform Joe Biden's numbers by anything looking at the special elections. If we have the exact same split as in 2020, we hold the House and we pick up the 2 seats in the Senate that we need for a filibuster-proof majority. So there's very real chance that the bottom falls out. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and pretend that we're headed to victory. But we are close. In this election, we may not know who holds the House for several weeks, because Alaska's not even going to count their first round of their ballots until November 24th. California has 4 battleground House seats in Orange County, and those usually take weeks to count because the ballot can be postmarked on election day. And so, ballot comes in 5 days later, it gets counted, right? So it takes a while to count. There are a couple really potential tight seats in Oregon. So we may not even know on election night who won. It's that close. So it comes back to every vote is going to matter. We're going to win and lose elections by dozens of votes. It is up to us as activists to make sure we do everything we can to help on the GOTV operation. dailykos.com/GOTV if you want to go find stuff. But it could be, somebody in Ohio make sure you call that person up and make sure that they vote and that their family votes. You know, somebody in Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, those house seats, there are house seats everywhere. That matters. Maybe you live in Chicago, not much is happening. Get your butt up to Wisconsin, help out there, because the Wisconsin Senate race, the difference between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes is ginormous, Mark. And that race is absolutely going to be won by about a couple thousand votes. If you can get up there and you can help get a dozen votes, and, you know, couple, 10, 20 of us are doing that. We're up in Wisconsin, we're up in Milwaukee, getting that vote out. Mark, that could be the difference.
Right.
So, and in the polling in Wisconsin, it's 50-50 right now. In civics, it's dead even. I just saw a CNN poll that had it 50-49 Ron Johnson. These are high. This is Wisconsin. This is a state that Joe Biden won by 12,000 votes, I think it was. It's going to be that close again. So this is our opportunity to, however we fight and claw our way to it, to win these critically important seats and maintain that majority, because the difference between holding and losing that majority in Congress is ginormous. And we have an opportunity. We hold the House +2 in the Senate. It's totally doable. We can get rid of the filibuster. And we've talked about it, Mark. We're talking about statehood for DC. We're talking the end of partisan gerrymandering. We're talking voter rights, maybe Puerto Rico statehood. I mean, there's just on the democracy side. I'm not even talking substantive policy and legislation. I'm talking democracy. We can actually go a long way towards rectifying some of the systemic biases that the system has towards the Republican Party, and biases that the Republicans are trying to lock in by electing Secretary of State to literally steal the vote in key battleground states.
Folks, again, we remind you, it's so important. And I'm going to even be blasting this to some of you electronically. dailykos.com/GOTV. People always say, what can I do? Right here. Just go to this one-stop shop. dailykos.com/GOTV. And I tell you, one of the most effective things you can do is phone bank. That's an option there for you. dailykos.com/GOTV. We're down to the wire. When we talk next week, we will literally be days away. From election night. Markos Moulitsas, as always. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Everybody, dailykos.com/GOTV.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.